Hi, I'm Marsha Pearlstein with the Port Townsend Film Institute, interviewing Barry Perlman. We got a Pearlstein, a Perlman, and she is the all-around. She produced, directed, and edited the short documentary Water. Welcome, Barry.
Thank you very much, Marsha. It's great to be here.
And I had the pleasure of viewing this film, and it is so well done and so powerful. It speaks volumes in just a very short time. How long does it run?
About 8 minutes.
About eight. I was going to say 8
packed minutes.
And I had a crisis in confidence. And so, anyway, first of all, what I've noticed from your biography is you've done quite a bit of different things in Tibet. What first got you interested in Tibet?
I actually had been working in just around 2000. I had been working on another documentary that never got made, like many don't, actually about Buddhism in America. I was an objective outsider producer working with a first-time director, trying to kind of capture that. And that was my first introduction to Buddhism and the concepts and learning anything about Tibet. And during the course of that film, I met a Tibetan Rinpoche, a High Lama, who lives in New York, about an hour and a half north of where I live, and just actually hit it off with him and just found him a really interesting man and spiritual leader, and found out about the kind of work that he's been doing back in his native land of Tibet. And during the course of some conversations with him about other things, he said, you know, the next time I go to Tibet, you should come, and you should make a film about my people before their way of life is gone forever. And he said that things will change more in Tibet in 20 years than they changed in 2000. That was a very tall order, but something that I spent a few years. It took a while till we actually got there. And there I was in the middle of Tibet at 14,000 feet, taking everything I knew about filmmaking and taking myself on a really challenging and eye-opening journey.
And you made 2 films at that time, Ritual Objects and Sampa?
Yeah, well, so the first thing that happened was in 2007, 2008, I made a feature documentary called Daughters of Wisdom, which was the main goal of the trip was to live at this Buddhist monastery that had been founded by Lama Norla Rinpoche, who took me there. I really wanted to tell this unique story about this group of women that was being given an opportunity in Tibet that they'd never had before. After I made that film, I had 70 hours of footage from my 2-month stay in Tibet that told other stories that I couldn't use in the film that I had, but didn't need to just go into the vault and have me and my editor be the only ones who ever saw. So I got some grant money, fortunately, from the Rubin Foundation in New York, and made 3 short films from the footage that didn't get used to tell the story that I originally told. So that is now Ritual Object, Sampa, and Water.
So Water has has an extraordinary statistic associated with it. 200 million hours daily are spent by women and children, women and children's time gathering water.
In the world, yes.
In the world. That is pretty amazing. By the way, you're getting all this extra footage and turning it into 3 more films reminds me of what we used to do in graduate school. We'd gather all this data, and then we'd have 10 different research projects depending on what angle you looked at it.
Yeah.
I think that's really, really important. But you really carried this film on your own, except for the cinematography. What was that like for you to do all the pieces?
It was very much like being an independent documentary filmmaker. For the feature film, I couldn't have taken over. I don't have the craft, so I had an incredible editor, Carla Ruff, who did the feature. I was so familiar with the footage and so had an idea of what I wanted out of these shorts, and they were contained enough for me. You know, people say there's nothing worse than a director that wants to edit her own work. The editor says that. By the same vein, I was very lucky that I had Gina Konstantinakos to shoot it in the first place. But we were a 2-woman band while we were in Tibet with a translator So I guess I'm used to doing things, and I think, as proven by my film, like one woman can do the work of 10 men, and often has to. So I guess we carried our own water barrels, and I had the luck of having a 1-month residency at Yaddo, the artist's residency in New York, and was able to just sit for a month with this footage and return to Tibet and really concentrate on nothing but making them.
So are you very spiritual, and do you meditate based on all your Tibetan experiences? Because I was once a Judaist, a Jewish Buddhist.
A Jubu, yeah.
A Jubu for a little while. Has that seeped into you?
It makes its way, it sure does. I didn't start out with the very first film that I just mentioned about Buddhism in America. I was the objective outsider. During the course of meeting the kids who'd grown up Buddhist in America, which is what the focus was, I started to realize that a lot of what Buddhism was about sounded a lot like my drunken 4 a.m. conversations about what the meaning of life is with my friends, and said, wait, there's something that actually talks about these things more than me making them up. And so it was kind of a curiosity, and then eventually I don't think you can go to Tibet and not find some deeper understanding. So yeah, I have a Buddhist practice now, but that all came about as a result of the film, and not that's not why I made the films in the first place.
No, it just seeps into you when you're in the environment. I imagine. Well, now you're taking a real different turn. You're developing Looking for Lepke, about the notorious Murder Incorporated gangster who was your grandfather's first cousin.
Yeah,
so tell us a little bit about what has you turning to Lepke.
Speaking of the Bronx, well, I think all my films, my first film was called Mahjong, the Tiles That Bind, and that was about how a bunch of Jewish grandmothers got associated with an old Chinese game. And do
you play Mahjong, by the way?
I don't answer that question publicly.
I have forgotten how, but I played and played and played.
I have my grandmother's set, I can say that.
I got a set.
And it's pretty. But I think all of and then I made the beginnings of a film up in Alaska in a small community of 150 people. So my films ultimately are about community and the ways that we are handed, and then develop our identities, individual identities, communal identities, and then how the community acts into forming the global world that we live in. So for me, while they're all quite rarefied in their own ways, the underlying thread and what I'm very interested in is kind of what makes people tick in communities and why we choose to live where and how we do. So for me, going to my next and turning a lens on my family, the nearest community to me, I would say, and then the larger Jewish community, that there was, yes, a Jewish gangster, and several of them, and he died in the electric chair in 1944, is an interesting exploration for me, further into identity and further personal. I think making these films in Tibet got me more comfortable, certainly because they were tied in, as we said before, to some of my spiritual leanings and shaped me, like the next number of years of my life, is to turn it personal is the next step for me. And to be comfortable doing that. And also because I understand that identity is construct and everything is phenomenon is projected, and all those wonderful things I learned from Buddhism make it a lot easier to force my mother to sit in front of the camera.
So how does your family feel about your exploring Lepke?
Well, I mean, that's the interesting thing, is that, when my mother was growing up, it was considered a shameful thing, and this family made up stories that he was adopted and that he wasn't even really Jewish, and all these ways that they went about separating and refusing to talk. And if you said his name in the street, my mother grew up with Buchalter as her last name, which was his. It was a shame for them to be associated, and so many of our family members and even distant relatives changed their name or refused to admit they were related. I grew up saying, I got gangster blood, and I thought that it was swaggery and interesting, and if I wanted somebody to get off my lawn, I could stand there and go, get off my lawn, I'm a gangster, you know. And by my generation, and I think that that's really, the generational changes is also an underlying current of my work, and how that changes, and how that mitigates, and why why that generation got so caught up in caring and being identified with somebody, where one generation later it's almost like a blip. But I think that's fascinating and interesting, and I think that even though it's about my family, it gets into deeper questions of history and of legacy, and kind of why we choose what is good and what is evil, and what that does to us.
And association and dissociation and
sure,
all of
sure.
that. So after Lepke, you have any, you know where you're going?
Oh, gosh. I may not live that one out. If I turn up the wrong stone. I don't know. I can't make too many plans beyond. Well, actually, there's one thing. I mean, like I mentioned, I had gotten a grant to make these 3 short films, and there's still plenty of footage, and there's plenty of opportunity. And one thing I've actually wanted to do for a long time, and didn't get to in this round, is I'd like to take the footage of life on a yak farm. Yaks are adorable to children. I think all kids like to watch animals being milked and all that. And though they don't do it intentionally, life on a yak farm is a sustainability model. They don't do it, they do it for survival, and they do it because everything on the yak farm, every part of it helps them sustain life. They use every part of the yak for either food or shelter, or, you know, they weave the hair to make cloth or rope. They eat every part of the animal that they can. They use all the milk daily to make yogurt and cheese and milk. So it's an incredible story where they're not doing it intentionally to save the planet. They're doing it because that's how they've always done it. And I think that having kids watch Life on a Farm and be able to also get them the message of understanding that it actually works to care about waste at the base level of that would be a powerful. I want to call it yakety yak, I think, and
that'll
and in addition to them watching cute animal, well, they're huge, but there's something very lovable about a yak, and and I think that I'd love to be able to do that film as well.
So how does this work? You have all your footage, and you really have wrung every last drop out of it, and continue to. Does that? So you're able to do that from New York, probably, but does it take you back to Tibet more in order to complete these films? Or?
I would love to go back to Tibet. Part of me feels like that was a once in a lifetime opportunity. Part of me also feels that I might not want to see. I might want to place that world in a bottle for myself of where I was. You know, the comment I go back to at the beginning where, you know, Rinpoche said, it's going to be changed more in 20 years than it's changed in 2000, and there's something for me that doesn't want to go and see everybody talking on cell phones and doesn't want to see things changing and things modernizing and everybody wearing jeans. You know, obviously change comes and it happens, and we can't get romantic about preserving the past, but I think for me that was a trip that will have changed me in so many ways that I don't know if I want to change that experience either.
Now I'm going to take a whole other direction. I've noticed in all your films, with the exception of Lepke, that they're very feminist or female-based, that you're really looking at the strength and resilience of women, and also the impact of various things on women. Mm-hmm. Talk to me a little bit about where that stems from in you.
Oh, that's who I am and always have been. I was born kicking. I was born a loud kid. I was born with a lot of ideas. Always, my mother instilled in me tremendous creativity. I was a child of the 70s, and my mother and her friends wore T-shirts that said, you know, a woman without a man is like a fish without a bicycle. And, you know, I mean, they were the founders of the Now chapter in the town I grew up in. I was always around strong women, and I never planned to be or became anything else. And I do think, you know, I mean, I take my cue even from the experience with Tibet, which was that, you know, this Rinpoche escaped from Tibet in 1958, came to America, came from a place where women didn't have any chance at any choice. They were second-class, third-class citizens. And I'm sorry, they're getting our attention. I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. So there was this man came from a culture where women didn't have any place in society. He came to a world where he met outspoken and empowered women, and he changed his mind, and he grew to understand, and took that back to his country.
So you didn't make him uncomfortable being who you were?
No, and on top of that, with all of the humanitarian aid that he brought to Tibet, and then he opened a monastery for women, and the people said, "What are you bothering with that for?" He said, "Just watch." You know, and now, so his becoming a feminist in a very short period of time by simply meeting Western women and understanding that, you know, the adage, women hold up half the sky, you know, and him understanding that whatever's going on in Tibet, 50% of the population is not being used to help this culture survive in Tibet. I mean, that it's profound to see. I certainly grew up taking it for granted in a certain way because I was born in a world where I could be anything. But when you get to see where it doesn't happen and where it doesn't work, then you realize that you have to tell those stories. I mean, I don't turn on a faucet anymore without thinking about a woman carrying 80 pounds up a hill.
Oh.
And
anybody who sees water.
Sure, and I think there are still plenty of people who don't understand that if they don't use the resources of women, they're not using the resources of the world.
But I really want to underscore, I mean, it is truly remarkable for you to impact Rinpoche. I mean, I've met Rinpoches in Berkeley. You know, part of I flirt in and out of the spiritual community, but it was always a one-way street. Rinpoches, the various Rinpoches who came to Berkeley, impacted us. I can't imagine what it was like for you to form a relationship where you got this man to see what is happening with women and to build this monastery for women.
I wasn't personally.
Well, no, for him to
sure,
want to, based on
understand.
his understanding that you gave him. That, are you aware of how remarkable that is?
I don't take any credit for that. He's an enlightened man, but yeah, I mean, I think he's an incredible person, and it's certainly finding somebody like that is why I could take a spiritual teacher as I did. So.
Well, we just have a very few minutes left, and you deserve the last word. So, first of all, let everybody know your website. That's important.
Well, if you go to www.btgproductions.com, you will see a link to Nangchen Shorts. Those are the 3 films we talked about. The 3 short films have their own page, as does daughtersofwisdom.com. That's the larger film. And I guess the film screening tonight with Bitter Seeds at 6:15. And then also, if you're interested in the larger film, the background story of the woman getting water, it's contained in the long-form film, Daughters of Wisdom, and the DVDs are for sale here, too.
And look out for Lepke, everybody. He'll be coming to a neighborhood theater near you one of these days. And that really interests me. I can't help but do a personal thing. I was 5 years old sitting at the TV, and my cousin Sammy was taken away by the cops because he was a minor, mob guy in Jersey.
There you go.
So
we'll have to talk.
Anyway, thank you so much, Barry Perlman, director, producer, writer of Water, and it's been a pleasure interviewing you today.
It was great talking to you. Thanks.